Us to explore this with grantees until November 5. That's the first Thursday in November.
I think you ought to meet in
What would you prefer?
Let's wait until after we've heard the testimony and the presentation. I don't think we're ready to make that decision
That
yet.
would be my idea too, that we can come back to this after you've heard the afternoon's presentation. So we're deferring any decision on that aspect. Would you go ahead with your next presentation?
Staff's direction in June, in addition to the goals, was to prepare and negotiate grant agreements based on performance contracting. The draft of the grant agreement that Brett and I have completed and spent a fair amount of time on covers these points. And if the staff would trigger the screen, we'll talk through them.
Should start getting the cable feed pretty soon.
Let's try the next screen of the 4 points if we can. There we go. The grant agreements, first off, from the standpoint of negotiations, for the standpoint of ease of use of the grantees, I want the ability to have the terms vary among the grantees. I believe that the grantees' individual goals provide for differences in definitions of things like commercial use, revenue generation, etc. So we start with a boilerplate, but the negotiations allow us to vary based on what each grantee has. Next, please. This is an issue that's generated some consternation. It may be out of our hands very shortly. All but one of the grantees have agreed to comply. All government activity and other activity in California complies. Following the Brown Act to me is a must for any use of government resources, regardless of what anybody says. These are taxpayer dollars. There's two bills on the governor's desk that would eliminate or make moot the commission's discretion in this manner. It would require Brown Act compliance as of 1/1/93. I don't know the governor's position on these bills. They passed out unanimously from both houses, from both parties. Next, please.
My only comment is I sure wish they'd put themselves under that so they couldn't do all the states' work in caucus all the time.
I agree.
Nobody knows what the heck they're doing.
My feeling is if the governor signs a bill, we should follow the law, but otherwise I have no problem whether anybody's under the Brown Act or not.
Okay. It doesn't make a difference to you. Okay. All right. Insurance requirements. Right now, the grant agreement from 5 years ago leaves open the requirements for insurance. We've reviewed that. In my opinion, some grantees are overinsured, some are underinsured. I've asked Brent to prepare in his judgment what would be the appropriate insurance requirements, what goes on their certificates, basically the same type of thing we specify for our grantee and licensees. I'm sorry, our franchisee and licensee.
And those include what kind of insurance, Rich?
General liability, equipment, vehicle. Broadcaster's liability as well. I find that some of the grantees have more insurance than I think we really need, than they need to pay for. So rather than saying get the insurance you think you need, we'll tell you what kind of insurance we want.
They'd certainly be permitted to get more of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
As drafted, those are the minimum requirements. Next, please. Several of our grantees have one of our grantees has small allocations. A very high percentage of the money we give them goes to overhead. I want to negotiate into the grant agreements the ability, with your approval, to waive certain audit and record-keeping requirements. I think we're overburdening some aspects of our grantees with unnecessary bureaucracy. I want that flexibility to negotiate. Next, please. Again, this is something that I believe was staff direction last time. The funding, and this is a key issue, the funding for the future is tied back to the goals, not tied to the allocation that Charles Dolan approved in 1982 and the incremental CPI adjustments that we've moved forward. We put our money behind the goals. You can set those priorities. We can negotiate and discuss and go around those however we want in public session. But that the automatic fixed funding every year, because that's what you got last year, goes away. And was there one more? Staff? No, next slide, please. This completes the key concepts in the grant agreements. Let's talk now about the specific grants. Again, the specific grants relate to the approved goals. I see a process where applicants will apply for grants tied back to those goals. This grant is under goal number 2, and this is how much money we want. This is what we can do with those funds. Next, please.
Very subjective.
In keeping with good program management, something that I've talked at length with the chair, the grants will include specific performance milestones for that grant under that goal. Right now, the performance milestones are global to each of our grantees, addressing primarily and only, for the most part, the only thing we look at, that I have authority to look at, is the number of hours programmed. If a goal addresses other activities that don't relate to the programming on the channel, then there needs to be specific milestones. If the goal addresses specific programming requirements, programming plans, and is tied back to specific milestones, and maybe not necessarily on an annual basis. I see the milestones in certain types of grants being important on a quarterly basis, so that we can monitor and see if the Commission's funds are generating the programming, the activity, the services that were intended. Right now we have a global, almost an entitlement program with very little detail around the individual, and I use the term program now in a budgetary sense, not in a TV sense, around the individual programs. Next, please. This issue is one that is very, very, I think, critical to overall. I disagree with any fixed entitlement long-term allocation. I don't think that's prudent management in today's fiscal environment. But I do agree, from the standpoint of what we're doing today in reviewing the annual budget and programming plans, that certain grants covering topics and goals which we know we agree with be given multiple year funding, that the grant be authorized for multiple years, that we don't review a grant each year that we know we're going to fund. I think we look at it, we decide to refund it on a year-by-year basis in keeping with good fiscal policy, but we don't reevaluate the purpose of that particular grant each year. For example, it's my belief in this community that, and it's stated within the goals, that the pure public access soapbox is something that we want and will continue for a long time. Let's develop in the first year a grant package that funds that goal clearly, concisely. We fund it for 5 years and say we'll give you X dollars for that every year. We'll review it, make an appropriation each year, but we don't go back through and reevaluate that grant each year. Multiple year grants. Next, please. Key one. Right now, we have built into the process a reward for over budgeting. It's my belief that any excess funds from any particular grant revert to the Commission for reallocation in the next year. Right now there's an incentive to budget high. I think there's two choices from a budgetary standpoint. I've been doing this for 20 years on how you deal with grants and programs. You can do like the county just did. You can cut departments 25 to 40%. And after they've been cut, say, anything more you can save, you can keep. Or we can go through in detail and look with more scrutiny than we have on the bang for the dollar and the issues within each grant. At the end of the year, bring the money back in and use it for reallocation. Maybe it goes back to the same grant again. But let's see that if we budgeted a grant of $25,000 and only $20,000 was spent, why budget at $25,000 next year, and why let that money revert to other purposes or outside our control? Next, please. That's it. These are the conceptual, I'm sorry, one more, here we go. Multiple grant applications. Within the structure of the goals you've just approved, the intent is that an applicant would apply for multiple grants, that any entity may apply for all 6 or all 7 or all 5 grants during a particular year, or may apply for multiple grants within a particular goal. Finally, and this is one that will be an issue here. As a matter of policy, it's my recommendation that the Commission not restrict its funding to the existing entities. I think we need the option, not saying that we actively go out and do it, but in developing goals for the future and our policies for the future, I think we leave open the ability to grant funds to other entities. This has, I can fit into the current budget problems that you have wearing your other hats. It may be that there are cable television purposes that can fit with the symphony or the opera. And they may come to you saying, give us X dollars, we will do a program, and we'll play it on one of the channels. I believe we should have that ability within our overall scope and structure. These are the key concepts.
I have a question about that.
Okay.
When you're talking about multiple grants and you're talking about individual grants, it sounds to me like you're talking about a program-by-program grant.
Sounds hard.
And I got a problem with that. But I want you to explain what you mean by it.
Okay, first we need to work with the term program. I tend to use program in a budgetary sense. What I see a grant applying for would be a request for $25,000 for X hours of television programming on topic Y. And there may be 10 grants submitted from a variety of entities requesting funding under a particular goal tied to a service or a program on the channel. Again, program in that sense to being a video program.
On any channel?
On a channel. It may be multiple channels. Talking about one of the grantee channels. Let's take one of the goals. Let's take the goal having to do with enhanced education. 3 grantees may be applying for grants under that goal, and may be applying with 10 different grants. The Commission will award a grant for not a specific program, or not usually, but for the series of programs. Maybe it will be a single program, a single activity. Maybe KVIE applies for a grant for $50,000 to do a once-a-week blockbuster on healthcare, and the Commission decides to fund that. But within that, we know what we bought. We bought a particular, in this sense, video program, so many hours of programming. We know what the costs are that go into that. And then you can decide if that $50,000 blockbuster under that goal is appropriate.
You're talking about the total amount of money being dispensed in that kind of a fashion?
Yes. The $870,000 in this year's budget.
Pardon?
In this year's budget, it's $870,000 going out to the grantees.
See, I see that as almost how to get from here to there, that kind of a concept. I can see that kind of a concept if you're talking about a programming concept that has a specified amount, but to say everything, that to me looks like, maybe we'll get into it when we talk about channels and sharing channels and everything else, if that's part of this, because
that is not a part of
that sounds to me like a free-for-all. With everybody having to write multiple grants, somebody having to read all those multiple grants, somebody having to program where all of those multiple grants are going to show up, on what kind of channels. And
the issue of channels...
That is a very, very different concept from what we are doing now, and a concept that, I think, while it deserves discussion, it certainly means it's an incredible amount of work.
Disagree.
You don't think it is?
No.
Why not? You're not having to write the grant application.
I don't think...
Unless you plan to write one for every Board of Supervisors meeting and everything
I've worked
else.
through... we can maybe let this go at a... One, this is a very typical grant process. This is what you see in grant administration on a broader basis in many cases. Usually, maybe not coming to the Board of Supervisors for a decision, but this is a typical grant process. One, two, it's my belief that the amount of work for the grantees to prepare the grants will boil down to 3 or 4 pages per grant. I've already drafted the forms. We can talk about those if you'd like. The total amount of work to put it together will not exceed, unless you really wanted to and want to make it exceed, and will not exceed the work going into the annual budget and programming plan now. What you will have out of it is focus. You'll have out of it specificity on what the Cable Commission's dollars are going for, specifically, not in the global, but specifically. To your second point, the grantees will determine by who applies for a grant within a goal which channel it plays on. That's not anything we're making a decision on.
I think what is emerging here is a necessity for choosing different words. First of all, there's confusion in the word program because it depends what what your own background is and what your activity is as to what it means. And this is the one that creates confusion, and it should be reworked if it remains in, and it can be. Okay? Now, what you have here is an outline of the very topics or ideas that are going to most involve the Cable Commission members, namely, are these ideas that you can agree with, or do you want to take that up after we've heard the presentation?
Do you have further presentation?
No, this concludes staff presentation. I would like to have Brent make a presentation relative to the opinion that he has responded to the chair from last month on that's before you.
Okay, on First Amendment, but I want to get back to the channel allocation.
Okay.
You got 7 channels out there, and I don't understand who is really going to be responsible for operating those channels and on which channel these grants are going to go. Who becomes the one?
It doesn't change. The existing grantees retain authorization to operate the existing channels under anything that's before you today. There is no, at this point, even though what you directed to staff, at this point there's no discussions of mergers, consolidations. That word has been bandied around, but it isn't operative here. There is no change in who we've leased our channels to. The only change is the process by which you allocate your funds. The same entities are still here. A grantee entity, will come forward in a different format with a little more detail, asking for money from you according to your goal structure, and will provide you milestones and provide staff additional detail on what they're going to do with that money. What is changed is that the fixed allocation is gone. Grantee X got X dollars this year. They may get more next year, they may get less next year. This is an issue that the grantees will talk about privately but won't talk about publicly. It's an issue that many of you will talk about privately but won't talk about publicly. This provides you a rational way to change the allocation of your funds and direct them towards goals that you've set and priorities that you've set. The entities and the channels they have don't change by virtue of this process.
Mr. Fletcher, I'd like to make a comment. Here is the crux of, I think, the problem, and that is the outline that you have given us, Rich, is something that we have not had a chance to look at before or discuss. And frankly, I don't agree with a number of them. And I have had comments from the grantees who are concerned about what might be coming. You have already drafted certain forms, you just indicated, and yet we haven't adopted any of this yet. So I'm concerned about how quickly we're moving in one direction. In terms of specifics, I just wonder what the boards of each of the grantees will be doing. It seems to me that we're usurping a great deal of their authority. There are 4 boards out there who represent those grantees, and I don't know that they would have that much to do if they don't have a fixed allocation of funds to deal with, and if they have other entities there to compete with their projects. I personally don't agree with your method of management where unused funds revert back to the Commission. I don't think that makes for good planning on the part of the grantees. I don't know how you could plan for a group of volunteers when come the end of the year, all of a sudden, you haven't spent your money because of whatever volunteer didn't show up for a particular project, and you lose that money. I think you built in a lot of waste when we don't permit the grantees to use the money wisely throughout the whole year. So I've got a lot of questions about the points that you've outlined, and I think we have to discuss those.
Let's talk about the process that was envisioned. First off, it would be inappropriate to negotiate with you now the key points that you're talking about. There's a reason behind them all. One, I'd emphasize that as presented to you, this is a negotiating document. So there are some things that are there for negotiation. I'll be first to admit that. I don't feel comfortable telling you what they are right now. Under the direction, I believe, that was given to staff last month, this is what you said to do, was go out and negotiate new contracts. Giving you a status report today, you obviously, or you appear to want to change that process. If I could, let's describe the process a little bit and then come back to what Brent had to say in the First Amendment. The process that staff was recommending, that appears to have some consternation now, was to take these draft agreements out and using what we've learned in negotiating the United Tribune settlement, the SAC Cable settlement, the PAC West settlement, the SAC Cable customer service regs. Ask the other boards and entities to take 4 weeks, review everything that's there, respond to us in writing. We've learned, if you can remember the Bill Cullen days, that words don't mean much until they're committed to writing, with an insert strikeout language, what you like, what you don't like. Let's look at it. Then let staff, with council, with the chair, or any of you that would like, incorporate the changes that we agree to.
I think that's where our problem is. You see, Sacramento Cable Television Company was the enemy when we were negotiating. That's why we had to negotiate. Tribune was the enemy. We had to negotiate because they held the purse strings. The grantees are a part of the public entity, and this whole commission exists so the public entity can have access to this technology. It's not. I think our mistake is the word negotiations. I don't know that we need to negotiate. I think that we should direct staff to work with the grantees and come up with a plan that can implement the goals. I don't think it has to be a we and they situation where we're negotiating. It seems to me that we have to give you direction to go back and work with the community groups and bring us something that we can live with that'll meet the needs or the goals.
May I make an explanation here? What we're talking about is measurable goals and measurable objectives, and money backing up those objectives in such a manner that the responsibility is evident, that the funds will be used for specific purposes, and that accountability is established in the use of them. When I became chairman, I perceived that money was getting tighter and tighter. I perceived that there was going to be a tremendous competition for any dollar, whether it came from tax sources or from franchise fees or any other source. I also perceived that if we did not demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that the funds granted to grantees were used in a highly successful and beneficial manner, that they would no longer begin to receive those funds. So this plan was devised at the administrative level, and with my help and concurrence, because my own background as a district superintendent in public schools made me fully aware of how you can set up a program, how you can monitor it yourself, and how you can demonstrate to an ever-increasing community who says there are higher priorities for dollars than TV programs, and work it successfully. This is not burdensome. Mr. Vaca, who is the chairman of one of the organizations that is a grantee, acknowledged that it would be no problem at all. It does not seem to be a problem to me. But of course it is far easier to just hand out the money and say good luck, hope you use it well, see you next year. Now, the money we're talking about, $800,000 or $100,000 or more, will buy 1 million meals for kids. And in many people's minds, that's a higher priority than producing local programming or producing cultural activities for TV consumption. So I'm emphasizing that the background to what you have heard thus far is a background wherein management, our legal counsel, and I and others have tried to put together a technical package which is workable and which demonstrates at year's end that there has been accomplishment, that the accomplishment has been orderly, that it met goals and it met objectives, and that the money was spent for that purpose or it was not spent at all. Now, I'm laying that before you because that's what you're facing today. What degree of responsibility do you want, accountability, or do you just prefer to do it as we have in the past, hand over the funds and go home? That's what we're facing.
Yeah, I think there's several different ways to look at that, though, Orville. At least I do from my perspective. And I understand that money is getting very, very tight. And I think long-term we're looking at an uncertain future, given revenues to even continue the programming on these channels. And so you have to look at, I think, several different aspects, and I've shared this with you before. I think when you look at, I'll just name a couple of them. If you look at PBS, for instance, there's probably, with that kind of access, there's probably a whole bunch of people out there who buy memberships, who support in many, many ways that kind of endeavor. So maybe their funding isn't threatened as badly, but it is, you know. They work hard for it, let's put it that way. The education community, I think, has a lot of extra resources that they can pull extra monies into, or that they can integrate resources with. If you look at the other access channels, if you look at access, where are they going to go in the future when there might be zero money here? You know, how are they going to program a channel? I mean, I think that's the reality we're looking at long term, is who's going to be able to program these channels when there's no money. And that might be the reality. If you look at it from that perspective, you know, is this the best way to go? Or are there other ways to look at how you're going to address this in the future, when it looks like a couple of the ongoing grantees are going to be able to figure out ways to continue, but how will we program other channels? And you're right, if it comes to a TV program, or it comes to meals for kids, or closing clinics and all the things that the Board of Supervisors has had to do, it's obvious this is not going to be funded from local money. If it isn't funded through franchise fees or through something that directly relating to television, there's going to be no money. But that said, I'm still a little uncomfortable with the type of program that's been described here today. And maybe that's because we haven't had a lot of discussion about it. We don't have a certainty about how that kind of an approach would operate, whether it would even be a cost-effective approach, because producing local programming is extremely costly. It is not cheap. And if we're going to be expecting, as a part of these community goals, to expect all 7 of these channels to be programmed just with community programming per se, locally produced programming, it's not going to work. There's not enough money to do that. No, it's not. I recognize that, but I'm saying that then you have to look at whether it's practical to do it under this kind of an approach, where these channels have been programmed from a multiplicity of sources, including local, including other type of programs they've acquired or might want to be showing. And I think some of what Terry's saying, how do you bring about a mix between what the commission might look upon? I look upon a mix over 7 channels. I don't look upon the mix in terms of one channel. And I don't know how the grants will relate to that. I'm willing to listen to testimony today, and I'm certainly willing to discuss all this. But I think really germane to it is probably what Brent's going to have to say also. I do not want to get into program content at all, because I think that's absolutely forbidden by the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. So, you know, all we would have to go by would be very broad goals of making sure that there's a lot of different kind of things offered to the community in a very broad-based approach. And how do you relate that to giving grants based on programs? So I'm willing to listen to Brent.
Yeah.
Lynn?
Of course, we haven't seen this before, but your mind up here is just going in different directions, how this kind of thing would be implemented. But and I'm absolutely convinced now that we need a lot of time to talk about how these function, and maybe these absolutely are the right guidelines, and maybe at the end of this process we'll decide with enough public input that they are. But we have so many questions right now. I think it's interesting is, for instance, talking about how you implement these goals, part of the goals are educational program, consumer and business information, religious programming, government programming, health programming. and if each of the 7 channels are competing with each other for some of those grants, those multiple grants, you'd have to almost say that a percentage of the money would go toward health programming, a percentage would go toward consumer. You'd have to do that because the commission would have to do that kind of thing, because you'd have maybe 200 grants for government programming or for education of students, and then you see what I mean? I think you need to really think about how you would carry this out. It's very complicated, at least as I see it right this minute. Maybe it's not as complicated, but these are general goals, which usually you try to keep your goals pretty general. You don't want to be too specific, but I think you'd have to have percentages. I think you'd have to do a whole lot of things. It seems like, maybe Channel 6 would be competing for some of the same educational money, perhaps, as the Educational Consortium or one of the other channels on the same subject area, the way this description is. And I don't know whether that's a great idea or not. I'd have to think about it. Some of the channels have gained some expertise in certain areas, and they kind of stay away from some of those other areas because they have their own separate expertise. And in some cases, that works quite well. At least I think it does, because I know where to go for part of that expertise. We need to really do some work on this, I think.
Mr. Fletcher, I'd like to suggest possibly a rewriting of our resolution, and maybe that'll give us the direction that we need. I'm referring to Resolution 92-005.
What page is that?
It's on page. It's item 2C, the small print in the right-hand column. I'm bothered by the word negotiate, and if I agreed to this last time, I apologize. I would like to suggest that this resolution be changed so that it reads like this. The executive director, along with representatives from the grantees, is directed to meet in roundtable sessions to prepare new grant agreements in the form approved by the commission and so on. So what it does immediately, it puts the staff and the grantees on an equal par, and they're to go out and work on these agreements so that they work cooperatively in roundtable sessions and then come back with us with something we can deal with. And I think if that's the playing field, then we might have some substance to deal with.
Except that, I'll tell you one problem with that, Terry. We haven't set any policy. Mm-hmm. We haven't, as a commission, given any policy direction to Rich. And that's what I'm trying to get to, is I'm trying to get to how do we give the policy direction and in what forum. Roundtables are fine, but if all of us tried to go to the roundtables at one time, we'd be, well, we're not violating the Brown Act because you're probably noticing the roundtables. So, but at least, I just have some real concerns that I would love to hear Brent's answer today. I would love to also hear from the grantees today before making a decision about what to do next. Because I think really the buck is going to stop right here with this commission. We are going to have to be the ones that are going to have to give the direction about how to go out. If we agree with some of these recommendations and we say that, then I'm sure Rich and Brent and the grantees will get together and they'll work out grant agreements. But until we say where we're going with some of these policies, I think it's futile. I think that they'll spar and they'll, and that's why I think we have to be a part of the process. I don't care if that takes a meeting every month or every 2 months, and if there's roundtables in between, fine. But the policy direction is going to have to be given by this board.
I feel we should give the grantees as much freedom as possible, and that we need as few policies as possible. No, I really do. I don't think. Well,
he knows where he is already.
I don't think there've been many problems. I'm not knowledgeable about many problems with the grantees' programming. Maybe I haven't heard about them.
They invent their programs right now. No member of the commission or those two gentlemen invent it. They make their proposals as to what they wish to do, what their ambitions are, how they intend to carry it out, what kind of money it will need. So we're not inhibiting them in that way. The proposals here are more technical in nature to give a demonstration more specifically that leads to responsibility and accountability. And that's what's been missing. In some cases in past years, whatever happened has been declared, well, that's what we wanted to do, and whatever the shortcomings were, there was no aftermath of discussion with commission or trying to correct it or to do better the next year. Now, we're entering an era where it's my idea that casualness has to stop where it does exist, and you do it by this program that Rich and others have set up. But if you want things to talk about today or on another occasion, it's those checked items that Rich presented, because they're the outline of that you either approve or disapprove or amend, you see. That's it right there.
I agree with that.
Well, could I hear about the First Amendment implications, Brent?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members, there are two things that I want to say. I said last time that this was no longer a lawyer's issue, and I think a lot of the confusion that has come up about what the form of this agreement should be, I don't know if that's a signal or what.
God has spoken, Brent.
What a lot of the confusion has to do with, I think, a subtle change. You recall that these grant agreements, which we've had all these years, were really forced upon you by us lawyers. At the time we drafted these agreements, we had concluded the Sacramento cable litigation. We were giving up our franchise fees. We were getting a lump sum. We were besieged by lawsuits. I was going to say mean-spirited, but I guess all litigation is mean-spirited.
Well, those were mean-spirited.
They were mean-spirited, and they held this community hostage. And so we gave you the advice that we had to give you, which was that we didn't want you to get involved in this programming of the cable community channels in any significant way for fear of giving grist for the plaintiff's mill. So we wrote agreements that were highly unusual agreements. We found out a few months ago when we had a problem with one of the grantees, we had no termination provisions. We had no performance provisions. That was not an oversight on our part. That was a conscious choice because we did not want to see them become the centerpiece in the litigation. Beyond that, there was a conscious desire on the part of the grantees to retain a great deal of independence. There was not a cooperative venture, and the chairman has said the commission has played no role at all, really, in controlling the use of this money in terms of the programming content. So what has changed is two things. Our own legal context, that is, the lawsuits are gone. And I think one never knows, but I hope for good. But secondly, the legal context in the larger sense has changed. And I learned long ago not to disagree with Supervisor Collins' legal judgment, but this time I do. When you are engaged in grant making, I just want you to know you have a free white pad before you. You have a clean tabula rasa to start anew. You can do anything you want to do in dispensing this money. You can now control, and I've given you a short letter at the chairman's request that outlines the law. You can control the content within your grant. Now, you cannot say as a condition of your grant that you don't want your grantee to do something else with their own funds. But it is now crystal clear, thanks to the U.S. Supreme Court last year, that within the province of your grant money, you can be content specific. You can make choices. Now, there are some areas that I'd like you not to do that, I suppose, and particularly in religious areas. But between the types of community programming that you've seen demonstrated here over the in the reports of the grantees, you can make those choices. You can make choices between types of goals that you want to meet. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but I wanted you to be clear that the law has changed and our situation has changed, and you'll not be beaten into following, as what your director said, Mr. Dolan put together in 1982 or 3. It may be right, it may be wrong, you may want to continue that. I just want you to know that unlike 87 and 88, this time the lawyers are not saying, well, follow this, get this skeletal agreement. In fact, what we've tried to do here, and I think this kind of got lost in the message, is the agreement that we proposed is, if you probably haven't had a chance and view your schedules to look at it in great depth, but it's much different than what we had before. It's a shell, and it's designed to be a shell. It's designed to be something for which there'll be, I hope, very little disagreement about the agreement, and that all the disagreements will be on the policy level about which goal you should proceed and how much money you want to put with it, and you won't have to hear from lawyers. This is designed to be a husk that will carry as little or as much money, programming resources, channels as you wish to give it, and in those precise proportions as you and your wisdom establish. This is not lockstep anymore, and you have the freedom to go any way you want to go. I think these agreements are much less all-encompassing than the agreements we dealt with before, and I just wanted you to understand that the legal rules have become much, much less important. I predicted last time you wouldn't hear from my esteemed colleagues in the audience. I hope that's still true. I really don't think we're going to be of much help to you at this point. This is not a First Amendment issue. You can fund what you wish, not fund what you wish. I've set forth a lot of the language from the Rust case of last year with the U.S. Supreme Court, and a refusal to fund some particular point is not an infringement or penalty. You really have the freedom that you were elected to have, and you can go at it any way you want. You can continue the old method if you feel that works, but you don't have to. And that's all I needed to tell you. And if you wanted the citations and so forth on the law that say that you now have more freedom than you've ever had before, you've got that. So it's really in your ballpark. It's not in the lawyers anymore, and there really are no, as long as you don't attempt to leverage your grant into other activities of the grantee, there are really no restrictions on how you disperse the money and even the content restrictions you put on it, and that largely came out of the Rust case, and it's just exceedingly clear. So have at it.
I guess question for staff. Rich, I heard you say that there'd be no change in the channel alignments, that the 7 channels would remain the way they are. And what would change is that the grantees could all compete for the limited amount of money to do specific type programming that we might want to send percentages on. I think Lynn's right. That's what you get into. You get into talking about a mix of what you want to see on the channels, and that ties them performance-wise to that type of programming. They're still going to have the whole rest of the channel to have to program. Are you envisioning that they're going to come in with the type of grants that are going to address just keeping everything going on the channel, with showing you where all the programs are and how these programs that they're applying for are going to fit into that overall scenario? Or how are you envisioning this is going to work?
Several questions there, Supervisor Collin. Let's take it piece by piece. What I envision, if we get through this process, is not much change in the first couple years in what you see on the channel and what the entities are funded with. What will change is eventually the information that you have and we have about what the particular grants provide you. Down the road, maybe second year out, Yes, there's likely going to be a mix in what is the current, if you took a snapshot now of what happens each day on our community programming channels, that mix may change. One of the channels now that has X hours a day of CG, of bulletin board, may have 2X. And another channel, based on your decision, that has half X, or has half the amount of alphanumeric programming later, because you funded a grant that moves something over to that entity based on the choices you've made against those goals. So yeah, will change come about? Yes. My personal belief is that what you're going to see is more programming. As we look at some of the choices, and the process will draw the grantees through that process of what they're doing. Right now, there hasn't been much consideration of cost. The funding's flowed. I'm not saying all our consideration is cost. I know I'm accused of that, and cost isn't the only thing that we're deciding here. But I do feel that the process needs some more balance. The process, I believe, will bring more programming to the channel.
If you were to take Terry's scenario, where the boards of those different entities are in all best of all possible worlds, they're involved in the programming choices and that go on those channels. Even under the present system, don't we get some sort of a budget so that we know exactly how the grantees are spending the money?
We get a line item budget.
We know the programming. They submit the programming so that we know the number of hours. We've got a program guide that goes out every single month.
Yes. Right now, we get a line item budget, and we get an hour total, and in some cases we get program descriptions. Yes. We don't get a breakdown within that to find out that if a particular video program, what its cost is, or a particular program, a group of series of programs, to know, is this, how does this relate in this grantee to this one over here relative to the same goal in terms of cost?
Just one quick question. Wouldn't you have to look at what is being presented on those channels first? Wouldn't you have to know how many hours you're doing strictly, just say, elementary classroom instruction, and wouldn't you have to know how many hours you're doing, let's say, sports, and wouldn't you have to know how many hours you're doing multicultural programming, so that then you could look and see that these three areas you're not getting the number of hours in those areas that the community needs. I mean, it just seems to me you'd have to figure out what's going on those channels first before you set. I just can't believe if you're going to do this, and maybe I'm missing something, but that you're going to do this process of multiple grants for certain, until you knew which areas you really wanted to be covered that weren't being covered.
That's up to the grantees and their boards. You've established what the goals are. The grantees can go back and look at their activities and say, is there anything that we're doing that isn't in these goals? The commission will hopefully have said what goals, what dollar amounts it puts behind which goals. The grantees can then determine, based on their knowledge and ascertainment, how to meet those and how much money to request from you to do that.
But so then, Richard, back to the same thing I said before, you'd have to put some dollar amounts on these areas. I just don't see how you can keep from doing that. You'd have to say, this is the amount of money that I want from classroom instruction. This is the amount of money that I want to go into multicultural enrichment programs. This is the amount of money that we want to go into science or whatever. And I don't think that's what we've done. I think it's going to have to take some work or something, and there's got to be some.
I think it also makes a value judgment that what is occurring now is not meeting all of these programming goals, and that therefore we should change the way we're doing it. But I think that is very subjective as to whether it is or is not, and that's one of the problems I have about getting into it in this way. I think it really gets us into a lot of very subjective goals. Maybe a way that we should look at it would be to set aside some of the money. I don't feel any obligation, by the way, to traditionally just fund the way we've always funded either. I mean, I'm not coming from that direction either. But I'm trying to find a way that if there are some things we really think are missing, wouldn't it be simpler to set aside a pot of money to which everybody could compete for programming for those things we think we're missing? But I don't know about you, I can't watch television. I mean, it's very rare for me to ever get to watch television. So how am I going to know on a very subjective basis whether we are or are not meeting these goals? So to me, that's part of the problem.
Maybe there has to be a way that each of the channels receive a certain level of funding. And then we do set this larger pot of money aside. But then we'd have to figure out, what areas needs are not being met, or what areas that we really feel are priorities. And I don't think this commission can do that. I think that would have to be a very heavy, grantee public involvement to do that. I think we'd have to know what's going on, the hours that is on these subject areas that are being programmed today. Maybe I'm wrong.
I guess the frustration, but we're going to hear from the grantees, obviously, but I guess the frustration is I'm not getting a lot of letters or a lot of calls from people saying that there's a lot of stuff missing. We're not doing things right.
I must interrupt just for a moment as chairman. The discussion has been necessary and is finally going into avenues of productivity. We have 50 minutes of presentation from our grantees at a maximum of 10 minutes per grantee this afternoon in order to hear their budget and to possibly adopt each one. We do anticipate they will be adopted, but that presentation is still before us. And in saying that, I'm going to have to ask that grantees not enter into these points of discussion here, but make sure you present your 92-93 budget and stay with that element. Then after that 50 minutes has passed, plus breathing time between, that will put us only up to 5 o'clock, and then if you want to stay later, we can take some of these other topics up. Now, I've made that as a comment. What do you as a commission wish to do? Do you want to continue the same discussion, or can we quickly close this out?
How many people signed up to speak on this item on Tuesday?
Well, we have KVIE, KXPR, SECC, Access, and possibly RCC-TV. Is RCC, the Religious Coalition representative here?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we ought to hear the people who want to speak on 2C, because we have to give some direction to staff, and then we can go into the budget presentation.
Would you agree then commonly that we'll drop this topic at the moment that we've been discussing and
no, that's not what we're proposing. We're proposing to
drop it for now.
No, I meant
finish
so that
here.
we can hear from the audience.
Yes.
Yeah, we're saying let's hear the people who want to speak on this item.
And I also believe we're still on 2B. I don't believe we've passed over to 2C yet, which is where we have requests to speak on.
Well,
So-
B or C, either one. We already took action, I thought, on Exhibit A on...
So there is a common agreement to hear from our grantees and so on. This is under item 2C, and I'll take it in the order that they were handed to me. John Hirschberger, representing KVIE, Channel 7. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Chairman Fletcher, and I am John Hirschberger. I'm from KVIE, but I'm representing, it's my privilege to represent today KVIE, KXPR, SECC, and Access. And I will focus most of my comments on the process and not what we have just seen. I think we are all greatly appreciative of what we heard a little bit earlier in terms of the attention that you are willing to pay to the process of coming to the new grants. It's something that we've pointed out, or you have already pointed out, that the resolution that you passed in June does give staff a great deal of authority and to move forward to develop contracts and including without limitation organizational mergers and functional consolidations and so forth. And although that's not in the contracts, he does have that authority under that resolution. I think we would all applaud some of the comments that you were making and leading up to Terry's suggestion that language be amended to somehow include the commission and grantees in the development of those contracts. And certainly Chairman Fletcher's original idea of the roundtables, which has proved to be so successful in other areas such as the development of the community program goals. I think we've shown that there is a real collaborative process there, and we're quite happy with the way the process went and the outcome of the goals. And I think that provides a very good model for the continuation of developing the contract concepts as well as the specific language in the contracts. One comment I would make about the contract process is that I don't think, given where we are at the moment, that it would be satisfactory for us to have a boilerplate contract that we go back and cross out a line here and add a few lines there. It seems to me that the concepts are so drastically different than the concepts that we're operating with now that it's really those concepts that need to be discussed, certainly at the commission level and hopefully among the grantees, before we are asked to respond to specific contract boilerplate language. And the material in your package, which is the joint letter from the grantees, it follows it's the page following the community goals, does suggest that we continue with that roundtable process in the contracting process. Finally, now just a word on behalf of KVIE, because I haven't discussed this with other grantees. Regarding the First Amendment concerns, I certainly wouldn't argue with counsel that the Commission has every legal right to get into the programming business if you choose to do so. Having been in a programming business for a long time, I would think you would want to think very long and hard before you get into that. You've seen some things in the papers recently about the difficulties that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has had, for instance, in dealing with specific, very, very nasty program issues. If that's what you want to let yourself in for as elected officials, then clearly you have the legal right to do that. But as Brent says, it's probably not a legal question. It's more of a policy question. We're pleased with the direction that we hear you're going in. I think it sounds like you do need some specific action to change the process, and looks like you're heading in that direction. We have not seen the material, the boilerplate, or the concepts prior to this moment, so we're in the same boat that you are, and so we would find it would be inappropriate, as the chairman suggests, for us to comment on it. I would think it would be difficult for you to act on it in this short time frame, having not seen it before. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. I'm going to call on Ron Cooper, who represents Access, and you're going to begin with 5 minutes of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Commission. I'm Ron Cooper, Acting Executive Director at Access Sacramento, and I will try to keep my comments brief and support the statements by John Hirschberger. My specifics are trying to address two of the items that were mentioned previously in Mr. Espasto's presentation. There is a reference, and it has been mentioned in December and again in June and again today, that Chuck Dolan, the wise and great mentor of us all here, somehow created this process. And now it's time to throw out the old and bring in a new process. And I beg to differ with that. Chuck Dolan was not around in the 18th century when the First Amendment was written encouraging freedom of speech. And what you have before you is a very carefully thought out process that most of you were involved in. Chuck Dolan didn't present the idea of, and I'm speaking on behalf of public access right at the moment, Chuck Dolan did not invent the concept of freedom of speech. He did not say that in 20th century United States the challenge is how we communicate with each other within and without our communities. The multitude of languages, the challenges that we face, that's not a Chuck Dolan concept. That is a concept that's embedded in all that is of this country. And the challenge before us in the 20th century, and that we have met for 6 years here in Sacramento, to the esteem and wonder of our nation and our world, and you heard it 100 times, is that the issue before us that we have been challenged by and answered is, how does the community decide what it wishes to say? How do the many multilingual communities within our community decide what they wish to say? And we have forged, with your help and vision, a model for the world in terms of people coming forth as volunteers with the sweat of their brow, training themselves, putting forth programming because they think it's important, and that we get out of the way when they're ready to take over that challenge. What your executive director is proposing, and you are on the absolute right track, is a complex system where all of a sudden the commission becomes the guiding light instead of the community, and even better, the individuals within our community. That is a proven system, excellent track record, and I just want to conclude with one thing. Also, this mention of one of the grantees has had problems. Let's be clear about that. The RCC-TV was set up as a channel without any funding. The fact that they have existed and done the work that they've done under those extreme circumstances, and then to be held up as the example that the grantees are not somehow fulfilling their purpose, is, let's say, an exaggeration. And let's talk specifics. Thank you.
Craig Powell?
I thought we were going to let attorneys talk.
He's going to disclaim he's an attorney.
Yeah, I resigned last
Here as a member of the public.
What is your affiliation here? I'm trying to read it, but I should just ask you, I think.
Well, I'm the attorney for Access Sacramento.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you very much. I share with all the other members of the public and all the other grantees the fact that today is the first time we've heard any of the details regarding these proposals. Today is not an appropriate forum for the grantees to respond, even in principle or let alone line by line. I strongly recommend and encourage the practice of moving to more frequent commission meetings. What we're talking about here is not cutting and pasting and giving inserts into language, but we're talking about making fundamental policy decisions on the future of community programming. To do that and to involve the Commission, and so as not to abdicate the responsibility for these matters to staff, the Commission does have to go to more frequent meetings. If we do this once every 3 months, we can be talking about this for the next couple of years. Now, with respect to the First Amendment, I cannot walk away from here today without making one editorial comment, and that is that if...
Brent's waiting.
And I know he is, and that is that I can sense it right now that our deceased esteemed Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas is spinning in his grave as we speak. That is my reaction. I will save my thunder and my oratory for the next session. Thank you very much.
I have to say, spinning without effect.
Okay, Phil Corvo, you come forward and speak for KXPR. Now, this is under the heading of Funding and Administration of Community Programming Reports.
No. Oh, is it? Okay.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, are we still on...
I thought we were still on 2C.
That's right.
Yeah.
It says.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to use it for a report, it's...
Oh, go ahead, Phil.
But...
I'm going to give my...
You're here on...
That is 2C.
to speak.
The platform is yours. I remove my introduction, and whatever you wish to say is the appropriate thing.
So this isn't where we do the grantee presentation?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just be very brief. I support what my colleagues said, especially John's comment in regard to getting involved in programming. As a general manager who has just removed a couple of programs from a couple of radio stations recently, I got to tell you, you really don't want to get involved in programming. So I'll just reserve my remarks for my presentation in item 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. David Vaca, who is president of SMCTC.
Is that under number 3 or?
Is this on item 3 or?
I thought we were on item 2C. We're just, yeah. Okay.
Oh, I made the error of assuming all of these were that. I'm out of order. Dave, would you hold on to your seat while I shuffle here for a moment? That's the end of presenters for 2C. Is there any comment or question from the Commission?
What I would like to recommend is that we have an opportunity to see in some written form in detail what was referenced here today, the goals that, the outline of how to get to the goals that was presented to us. They said they had boilerplate language on grant agreements. We've never seen that. I would like to see that. And I would recommend that we go to monthly meeting schedule until we come to an agreement. And somehow we have to schedule on the agenda how we take those topic by topic and discuss them. If you also want to be holding interim meetings, roundtable meetings, I don't have any objection to that. I just know it'll be difficult for all of us to get there.
I'd like to insert one idea here so we may move forward. There is an alternative action plan that we could incorporate at this moment. I think what has been produced, even though Commission has not seen these papers, has value in bringing to closure in the initial stage the proposals for the 1993 budget use of funds by the grantees. I want to read this as a possible motion that we might make on this. By October 2 of 1992, parties desiring to comment on the draft grant agreement shall submit comments to the Commission in writing. The comments shall also include a statement explaining the rationale supporting any proposed modification. The Executive Director is directed to review all submissions received and, in conjunction with the Chair and Council, incorporate modifications, deletions, or insertions as they deem appropriate. And we would report to the Commission not later than October 30 and to all persons who provided comments. Then the Commission shall meet in workshop session on November 5, and we could insert regular meetings prior to that time. And it would be for the sole purpose of receiving comments and for inserting into the plan whatever the Commission feels is appropriate.
The reason I couldn't support that, Orville, is because we haven't even discussed the policies. And it would seem to me that this is a great departure from any way that we're going to proceed. And I don't know how you can structure, perhaps we need to structure the agenda for the next meeting, and I would assume we could have a meeting each month. I don't know what we have to change. Does our lawyer tell us we have to change anything, or can we just call special meetings?
Go back to monthly meetings anytime you want.
Okay, so I would suggest that we hold a meeting in October, and at that meeting, we as individuals, and that includes the grantees as well as the board members, we need copies of this material. We haven't even seen it. I mean, the only thing we've had is what was presented to us orally today and on the screen. And if there is material that exists that has grant agreements or boilerplated information, etc., I would like to see it. I'd like to see what direction. I'm not tossing everything out. I'm just saying that we owe it to the community and we owe it to ourselves as a commission to discuss these as discussion items first and finally come to a vote on which way do we want to go.
Do you wish to meet, I'm going to ask two questions. Do you wish members of the commission to meet in the month of October.
Yes.
I think we have to.
Yes, I
Good
think we
commission
do.
meeting. Can it be the first Thursday of the month, 2:30 p.m. as we now meet? Sure.
That date would be October
That'd be October the 1st.
1st, okay.
Might as
And it
well
would be
stick
at
with what we
2:30
have.
and,
Circulation of the information that was
Well,
and any of the comments presenting probably presenting
yeah.
then I think then go forward with whatever process is determined at that time.
Okay.
I'll set it up pretty well.
Now, the purpose of that meeting, I think, has been well stated here, but to review it just for the secretary, it would be to review all materials that might be proposed and to review the topics which we saw as checkpoints that were presented here today and any other allied topics. That would be it.
And I think certainly the grantees in an informal way with their boards can respond in writing. I always think things are good in writing to those. They have to have time to study them also. I don't think it has to be formal or anything, but it would be good to have that on the agenda, the material provided in the agenda, which means you have to get it to staff before, in a timely way, so that it can be added, and so that we can just look over it. But I think it can be just very informal. It doesn't have to be an extensive paper or anything, just some of your ideas in response, and then certainly questions can be asked and answered at that next meeting.
All right. There is no objection to passing out these proposed forms and so on. But we're saying this is a just supposing. We're asking for reflections of your opinion of any part of it. And those would be collated but not editorialized on by our staff. It'd simply be going to each commission member prior to that October 1st meeting so that it would be a part of the packet. This would essentially be a one-topic meeting with full participation by people in the audience as well as commission. And we would limit it to the discussion of what the forms and so on are going to be. Is that satisfactory then?
yes, because I think by that time there will be some response to the whole idea of doing the whole system of community programming through a grant approach that is a very different approach from what we're using now. It's still grants, but in a very different way. And they might also want to look, though, at all of the different ideas and bullets and comment on all of them. There might be alternate ways that they might want to make suggestions to how we might best go forward in the future.
Is there any other item that you wish to review, Rich, under the heading of item number 2?
No, Mr.
That
Chairman.
closes that one?
Yes.
Okay. Then we are ready for item number 3, which is a summary of grantee
Excuse me, Chairman.
1991-2 reports and 1992-3 annual budget and programming plan.
Excuse me, may I ask council, do we need to make a formal motion for that meeting?
We need a motion to call
Yeah,
a
we
special
will need
meeting.
a meeting for the motion for the meeting, but our bylaws say not less than every 3 months, and I think we set them to every 3 months by motion, so we probably ought to just go through the motion to make it a regular meeting. Are we going to go back to monthly then until, for what, 3 months?
I have the privilege of calling a meeting.
Certainly you can call a special meeting, absolutely, if you want it as a special meeting.
That involves special notice requirements.
So I don't think we need to special notice it, so I would move that we meet October 1st and go back to a monthly meeting schedule until we give our staff directions, policy direction.
Second? Okay.
And may I clarify that we'll keep that on the first Thursday of the month,
Yes.
2:30, as long as we can find the meeting room in your schedule.
Hope
And
we
then
haven't
the
lost
chairman
the
would
room.
change it.
Hope we haven't lost the room either.
Okay.
We'll have to go check.
Thank you.
We'll be meeting
Got a
Thursday
motion?
evenings here. I don't know whether 5 or 6 o'clock.
hopefully we'll be
general
through
plan.
by then each day.
Okay, we're calling the roll then on the motion to meet on October 1st.
And monthly thereafter.
Motion, did we have a
Monthly
second?
thereafter.
Did you have a second?
Yes, I think.
Oh, thank you, sorry. Collin,
Yes.
Roby,
Aye.
Strang,
Aye.
Grow,
Aye.
Costanis,
Aye.
Natoli, Fletcher.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Grantee presentations, we'll call upon them in the order listed here. KVIE shall be first. Dan Tilton.
Hello, everyone. Kind of feel like we're
The leadoff
moving,
batter.
moving someplace else, different direction. And there's so much to say and so little time. I'll begin with our year just ended. We accomplished our goals of providing local public service announcements and improving the look and quality of breaks between programs. Examples of PSAs on Channel 7 include public transportation awareness that featured some of our local celebrities here, literacy, power of teaching to recruit new teachers, college-bound, AIDS awareness, drowning prevention tips, and many, many more. We've had a wonderful response to using PSAs on the channel, and now we're just flooded with requests.
I'll bet you are.
Channel 7 joyfully participated with other grantees in the Joint Viewer Guide, and we're very pleased with the results. Despite the increased cost of programming and operations, the service was managed very cost efficiently, came in just under budget, and managed to reserve $15,000 for capital equipment acquisition this year. This success was due in part to the efforts of KVIE corporate staff who began in late fiscal 92 to seek program underwriting support. Our final budget reports $13,000 was earned in fiscal 92 for this purpose. We're rewarding our corporate support staff for this successful effort by asking them to raise $48,000 in support of service in 93. In addition, I'm pleased to report the 1991 Channel 7 series Memories recently received several program excellent nominations and awards. Among them, the series and individual programs were nominated in the various categories for the Hometown USA Awards. The program, Gaman, The Internment Remembered, won the Hometown USA Award, the Multicultural Award. Gaman was also nominated for a regional Emmy, won a National Tele Multicultural Award, and recently received the Silver Corporation for Public Broadcasting's Award of Excellence for Multicultural Programming.
And Jan, you had one of the stars of Gaman here today. I saw her out there. Mary
Oh, I
Sakamoto and
didn't know
Al
that.
were-
Great. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, she was here, but I think they've already had to leave. Yeah.
Oh. I'd also like to report that the Memory Series has been distributed for national broadcast on public television and to classrooms through a national cable service serving 8 million students. I'm sorry, however, to report, due to lack of funding, we're unable to continue production of that oral history series. We are now seeking independent grants so that we can resume production. On to fiscal 93. As we stated in our annual report, this is a pivotal year for KVIE Channel 7. Our most important activities will include implementation of the final phase of our multi-year technical plan and related program service expansion. A year ago, this commission directed grantees to adequately plan to ensure reliable and continued operations and further cautioned us that new or additional funding may not become available if equipment fails or becomes obsolete in the future. KVIE had a multi-year plan in place, and this fiscal year we will implement the final major step. We might call that a milestone. This will substantially expand scheduling flexibility to further improve service to our general audiences and for convenient use. The system will be upgradable, and because it is integral to the KVIE facility, will take advantage of the advances of the PBS satellite-delivered services. In fiscal year 93, we will begin delivering 12 hours of first-place service repeated once in 24 hours. Not only will this change enhance the service value, it will make our listings so much easier to read. In addition, we will redesign the service. Our overall program service goal is lifelong learning. I'm going to give you some highlights. We will schedule a block of programs we call Ready to Learn. Those programs include Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Lamb Chop, Shining Time Station, and more. These programs prepare young children for school by teaching social values and elementary education principles. The service will be scheduled at a regular time for home parents and daycare providers to rely on. We will also serve adults with college credit courses and with new series like Destinos, an introduction to Spanish. An exciting new scheduling strategy will provide special blocks of programs that are of particular interest to local viewers. The first is Election 92 Primetime. From September 28th through November 4th, Channel 7 will devote the hours of 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. to programs on major issues of concern to our country and our local communities in this election year. Targeted specials will air at 8 p.m. They include programs like Power, Politics, and Latinos, Move Over, Women in the Political Campaign, Health in America, Searching for a Cure, and Why Vote. At 9 p.m., Bill Moyers will enlighten our viewers with his Listening to America series. Election 92 wraps up each night with a critically acclaimed McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour at 10 p.m. In January of 1993, PBS moves to a new satellite and is now planning to provide multiple channels of programming designed to educate, enlighten, and inform. The Channel 7 service, with its new flexibility, will have direct satellite access to take advantage of those services. Excuse me. We are enthusiastic about the Channel 7 service and what we can provide this year. But as our financial analysis submitted to you on August 1st demonstrates, we have reason to be concerned about the future. Despite popular belief, just like local, state, and state government, other nonprofits and corporations, KBIE has faced serious financial challenges. In the past 18 months, we have reduced our staff 22%. We are working harder, smarter, and more efficiently. Trust me, we've become experts at doing more with less. We do it very well. If you look at the people that are gathered here today, including yourselves, you'll see a collection of dedicated, capable people. And together, we have developed a valuable, important community service. This support group extends far beyond those who are here. An extended network of support includes schools, PBS, other educational institutions, and countless volunteers. You have developed a mature and a valuable service. As a last comment, I urge you to consider the value of this resource and to take care in preserving what you've accomplished. Any questions?
Any comment or question from staff? Thank you very much, Jan. Now, Phil, we gave you an opportunity to warm up. I'm going to call you forward now officially to speak for KXPR under this heading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Phil Corvo, General Manager of KXPR. The same amount in dollars from KXPR to provide a 24-hour-a-day, 360, is it 65 or 66 days last year, service, audio service on 89.1. The service became more news and public affairs oriented. It used to have a jazz emphasis, but when we went on the air with the broadcast station that had a jazz emphasis with KXJZ, it made sense to make it a more news and public affairs service, and we're working toward a 24-hour news and public affairs service. The dollars went toward staff time, audit supplies, and some programming expenses. And this year we expect to continue the 24-hour service with even greater emphasis on news and public affairs programs, from repeats of what our staff does locally to BBC World Service reports. And I think it's become an excellent service. Problem is, it sort of takes a rocket scientist to figure out how to get it. Now that the digital service is in, which is very good, you have to figure out how to split the signal and hook it up to your receiver. And so one of my goals this year is to, and then this is not a dollar goal, but it's a personal goal, is to work with Rich and seeing if there are some ways that we can make the service more available, maybe underneath the Metro channel billboards. We'll work with Ron Cooper to see if we can work cooperatively with the two audio channels that are also available through Access, and to try to get to try to increase visibility and listenership of the service, which I think is really good. In fact, I listen in my office to the cable service more often than the broadcast channels. So those are our goals this year, and we hope to increase listenership and to make as great a use of the dollars which you've allocated for us as possible. And we thank you very much for that.
Good question.
Thanks, Phil.
Yes.
Phil, have you used the technical expertise of the other grantees in terms of solving some of these problems?
In terms of being able to receive the...
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
That's an area of cooperation that you might want to tap that would probably at least head toward the goals that we've been talking about all afternoon.
Good idea. Thank you. I will.
Other question or comment? Thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Dave, we've warmed you up. It's now your turn as president of SMCTC.
Thank you, Chairman Fletcher. I represent the Sacramento Educational Cable Consortium as their president this year. As you know, we are a true consortium. We represent all levels of education. First, K through 12. Secondly, the community colleges, and finally, the university. I have 3 people with me today. We'll take about 2 minutes each, so we shouldn't take more than our allotted time, who will help me describe the kinds of activities that we're involved in. You have received from us our financial report and evaluation, our budget and programming plan for 92-93, and the one covered in yellow, SECC overview. I hope you have a chance to read especially the overview, as it's a good description of the activities that we did this year. Before I introduce other members of our board, though, I would like to call attention to comments that I made in a cover letter that I sent with these documents. SECC has been honored as the best educational access corporation in the United States. On July 16th, SCCC received the Overall Excellence in Education Award from the National Federation of Local Cable Programmers. This award recognizes not only the outstanding programming that SEC offers, but on its 2 channels, but also the multitude of services provided. There is a dramatic increase in programming and services despite no increase in commission funds this year. The above increase in programming is due to the increased support of SEC members through grants and corporate underwriting. SECC will be offering an average of 16 hours a day of programming per channel, equivalent of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days per week. Approximately 1,500 students enrolled in courses by cable from the Los Rios Community College District. And finally, live classes for credit have begun for high schools. As I said, we have 3 members who will represent each of those 3 areas in our consortium. First, I'd like to introduce George Nicholson, who is a curriculum specialist in technology with the Elk Grove School District.
Thank you. K-12, yes, George Nicholson, Elk Grove Unified School District. I'm also a member of the SECC board. K-12 television programming in our area, live broadcast television, is in its infancy. And Elk Grove last year put on a geometry broadcast directed to 8th grade junior high school students to receive geometry. Geometry is usually taught in the 10th grade. We have a number of students who were unable to attend because of transportation problems and scheduling problems high school. And what we did was we wrote a grant through the State Department, the Technology Department, AB 1470, and in cooperation with Casumas River College, Los Rios Unified, Los Rios, and CSUS, we managed to broadcast live geometry classes, put it on SECC, and reached the students both at home to receive the instruction because they were off track, and also while they were in school. We're doing the same thing this year, and instruction began on Monday. This year, San Juan will be broadcasting approximately 20 hours of live instruction directed toward high school students. Elk Grove, again, as I said, will be broadcasting geometry, and we will also be offering pre-algebra to 6th grade students. Last year we offered pre-algebra for 1 month, and it was received by about approximately 600 students. I am in the position of receiving phone calls from parents and from students during the course of the day, and I've got a couple of anecdotes that I'd like to relate to you. I received a phone call from a grandfather who was beaming because pre-algebra instruction allowed him to get closer to his grandchild at home. The grandfather taped the broadcast and then worked with the student on the pre-algebra instruction. I had a father call just last week talking about the getting ready to receive the geometry broadcast that we were preparing to put on, saying that his daughter was confined to home, and this was an opportunity for her to receive geometry instruction. He was very thrilled about that. I have to tell you that we're not commercial broadcast. We're kind of warts and all live broadcasting, but the instructional techniques are sound. The students are learning, and we really appreciate SECC's assistance with that. Let's see, I think I'm just about done. We are, again, with San Juan, we're offering calculus and economics and sheltered world history for non-native language speakers, and we would like to thank the Cable Commission for its support in the past and hope for continued support in the future. And I would also recognize Terry Casanis for his vision and his support for what we're trying to do in Elk Grove. Thank you very much.
Any question or comment? Terry, I didn't know you had 20/20 vision, but you do. Huh? Excellent.
Representing another level of the consortium is Dick Beamer, Assistant Chancellor from the Los Rios Community College District.
Thank you. Dick Beamer, Los Rios Community College District. We refer to Terry as the godfather of our effort in Los Rios in instructional television. I'd like to briefly share with the Commission at this time the degree to which the district has made a commitment to distance learning in the Sacramento region. We currently offer 51,000 credit students through our 3 colleges and the Placerville Center. By the end of the academic year, we hope to serve over 1,800 of those students through our credit courses on Cable Channel 21. Our target market is the older working adult and those students who are unable to come to campus on a regular basis. We benefit through our membership on the board of SCCC, which allows us access to Cable Channel 21, but the district also invests significant resources in our delivery. We have an annual operating budget of $32,000, and if we were to add in the costs of the salary of our 2 full-time equivalent faculty members, that would exceed $100,000. We started with 7 courses in 1986-87. This year we project 24 courses for 92-93. We find it to be an extremely cost-effective instructional delivery system. We value the opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Thank you.
And representing our final level from the university, from the California State University, Sacramento, is Robert Arianes, Dean of Regional and Continuing Education.
That's an impressive title, Bob.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words to you about our participation. I represent the university on the Sacramento Educational Cable Consortium Board of Directors, member of the Executive Committee, as well as member of the Program Committee. Program Committee has representation from a variety of school levels. Our effort over the past few years has been directed primarily at meeting some of the stated needs of teachers. For example, as new curricular demands arose, we have tried to help the teachers prepare for those by obviously providing faculty various activities, some of which have been described by individuals just before me. Also, by scheduling our classes which are of interest to teachers on television. For example, this past year we had several activities in the area of religion, world religion, not in terms of proselytizing obviously, but statewide curriculum required more attention to religion in the classes, and we had the good fortune of having several faculty who are relatively well known and a great deal of sophistication in this area present classes, and we arrange for those classes to be televised on a routine weekly basis. We've also utilized our faculty and the cable arrangement, particularly channels 21 and 22, to go after outside money. And last year, for example, we wrote a grant for over $500,000, which was entitled Safe Substance Abuse Family Education, and prepared and transmitted through last fall a series of modules aimed at the family and the schools and teachers, children, administrators, employee assistant program directors throughout the metropolitan area, in particular Sacramento County, aimed at covering a variety of topics associated with substance abuse. I don't have the credits that the program received, but we were very pleased with its development and its presentation. This coming year, we look to change our focus somewhat. We plan to continue to support curriculum needs of the school authorities, school officials. I think that's ever more important, particularly in the budget issue, that the crisis that we all face. But also we will be directing attention towards offering classes and degree programs at students. As you all know, the severe budget cut, state of California has a responsibility for educating a large number of people. We can't do it under the present budget status. We're going to try to get more bang for the buck. We're going to try to get some students registered out there who are watching it on screens and get them through a program. Benefits, obviously, one is apparently we're going to operate more efficiently, but also we hope to get students through. Right now it's taking 5, 6, 7 years to get through some of these degree programs. We'd like to shorten that. I'd like to thank, I think the cable arrangement we have now has been very, very helpful to all of us, in particular those people interested in education, whether it's K to 12, 12 to 18, or lifelong learning, as the expression you've just heard a few minutes ago from KVIE referred to. Thank you.
Thank you. David, your time is up. Do you have a summary you wish to make?
Just a very brief summary. I want to say that we're very proud of the efforts that we've made and are proud of the efforts that we continue to plan to make. And I have placed at your place today our instructional resource guide, which contains all of the programming for the current year. We look forward to a very positive relationship with you and your staff as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Michael Hayward is next, Access Sacramento representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michael Hayward, and I'm chair of the Board of Access Sacramento. Ron Cooper is going to give you the nuts and bolts of our programming plan, but I just want to say a few words very briefly, all within our 10 minutes. First of all, I'd like to thank the Commission. If you've done nothing else this afternoon, you've made it possible for me to sleep easier tonight than I did last night. Secondly, as a former broadcaster, I can tell you that our profession is very much like your profession. If you're doing something wrong, you're going to hear from the public and hear loud and clear. I've been involved on the fringes of the recent situation that started with the Asian community, and I am delighted personally to see that there is a good compromise in place now on Channel 2. Naturally, with a community that...
two channels.
Well, with a community as diverse as ours, of course, all language groups are not going to be satisfied. And I would like to say that Access Sacramento will do all in its power to make it possible for, well, our very reason for being is to make it possible for ethnic groups, smaller groups in the community to have access to the media which they otherwise would not be able to get. Now, I'm sorry that Kim Rukert isn't here because I hope that Cindy will convey a message to him. I've had a couple of very positive discussions with Kim, both on this language problem and on Access Sacramento. He, like individual members of the commission, have made very useful suggestions on changing and improving the look of some of our programming, and I think you will see in the course of the next year there will be some changes. Kim particularly has offered us a satellite dish, and that's going to make it possible for us to pull in programming that is not now available to us. The only thing that's holding that up is the discussions with the city engineers on exactly where to place this dish. Finally, let me simply say that our search for a permanent executive director is in its final stage. And now that you've decided to meet on October 1st, it may well be that by that time we'll be able to make an announcement. It's been on the back burner, frankly, because Ron Cooper has been doing such a good job as the interim executive director. And without further ado, here again is Ron.
Thank you, Mike.
Ron Cooper, Acting Executive Director, interim wannabe of Access Sacramento. I really want to respect the time limitations. As has been the policy of Access Sacramento for the 6 years of our existence, all of our programming goals and information has been presented to you on an annual basis. We went a little bit further this year because of the questions that have been raised. The full document was mailed to you as well as to Rich for your examination. I just wanted to hit some of the highlights of that and to be available to any questions that you have. I think it's very important to keep in mind, as I was referring before, what is the mission statement of Access Sacramento, and in fact, what is public access, which is a very unique entity. And I really can't emphasize enough how both the wisdom of this commission and other members not here joined with some very bright and very courageous volunteers in our community have forged a model for the world. The mission statement that best describes our current priorities is found in our operating rules and procedures. Access Sacramento is a nonprofit corporation whose purpose is to empower individuals, organizations, causes, and groups within Sacramento to produce and or present their own non-commercial cable TV and radio programs responsive to the full and diverse range of Sacramento County's residents, perspectives, concerns, issues, and interests. Access Sacramento coordinates outreach, training, production, playback, and promotional activities to achieve these goals. We have, with each year, submitted for your attention, and we have always assumed for your approval, goals that challenge us with each year. In the document that I sent to you, there are graphs and charts that show with each and every year we have improved upon what we did last year. And even in this, I think, very difficult and trying past year, after losing the executive director, Randy Mendelson, who had been with us from the beginning, even in this transition year, all goals were achieved and surpassed. We have a goal of 26 hours a week of original programming. We surpassed that by offering 28.7 hours of original programming. We had a goal of 1,350 hours of first-run programming. We surpassed that with 1,491 hours. We had a goal of 2,400 original programs. We surpassed that with 2,499. And on and on and on. Again, the details are included and have always been available and will always be available to this commission member and to the executive director. One thing I think that helps to put it in perspective is some of the programming specifics. Communities within our community, and I think there are some folks here today with us. Sacramento is really, I think, blessed with various multiple cultures and languages. But the difficulty is, how do these individual groups, sometimes numbering into the hundreds or even a few thousand, find voice in our community? Indeed, find voice on the commercial broadcast networks, because of business reasons, must appeal to mass audiences, and therefore small numbers just don't equate. Access Sacramento has always reached out, but in particular, every Tuesday night now we produce a program called Sacramento Cultures, which is a program in the language of that given people. We have already done programming in Vietnamese and Russian and Hmong and on and on and on, Chinese and so forth. And we will continue to do that. Our plan in the future is to buy a captioning device, not only because of the American Disabilities Act for our hearing impaired viewers, but also, very importantly, for our English-speaking only viewers to listen to what the Vietnamese group or what the Russian group has to say, and what are the issues for that community, because we share their interests, though maybe we don't share their language. We expect to see increased mobile van productions. One of the challenges of this, of course, is, as all of our activities are, they're volunteers. That's a lot of work to take the van out, but with the help of Cosumnes River College, our continuing partner in training, they are offering a class in sports casting that's going to mean regular sports programming coming out of Cosumnes River College, which means also greater trained van crews. Look for programming from Christian Brothers High School along the same vein. Mr. Spastos proposed the idea of, with the conflict on Tuesdays, adult and Folsom meetings and the request by Sacramento City Schools, so we're exploring the possibility of the van being used for those school board meetings. Wednesday night, live wire, half hour. Some of you have been on the program. During the upcoming months, we'll focus on political issues. It's a live call-in show every Wednesday from 6 to 6:30. Thursday nights, underground programming by and for young people, and the list goes on and on. This is programming that Access Sacramento has in its welcome mat observed that it is difficult to provide through the volunteer mechanism. The volunteer mechanism, however, provides a variety of music programs, health-related programs, talent-related programs. We've reported all this many times before. Just in conclusion, so that you have a sense, I think, of apples-to-apples comparison, I must say something. We have the honor of going last in this presentation. The other grantee groups, which we really prefer at this point to be called nonprofit programming organizations. I wish that we could get away from this parental authority concept. We are professionals, we are colleagues, and we work together, all of us, Mr. Espasto, the commission, the community, and the volunteers, to achieve all of the goals. This is not adversarial, it never has been. And the accolades that have come before you in the last 40 minutes are something that we should all treasure as a unique aspect of our community. And when it comes to financing and fundraising, I put a green sheet up on your paper because I find it very interesting. This was a document that we didn't create, so it's not self-serving, at least in its creation anyway. This was a document that was put together as an analysis by Columbus, Ohio Access Center. And what they did was they did an analysis.
Your time has expired.
All right. All I'm saying is that if you'll notice down at the bottom there, Sacramento, California, public access, 19 cents per subscriber. And you can see for yourself the rest of the listing. Note Fairfax County, Virginia, which proudly claims 89 hours of original programming a month. We average 126. You could see 46 cents versus 19 cents. If we're going to talk dollars and cents and effectiveness, there's a lot of ways to look at it that haven't been discussed, and we're more than happy to work with you. Thank you if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the Religious Coalition representative here? Right. You've heard the grantee presentations, and is there any discussion or question from any member of the commission?
I have a question about the budget. We did extend the budget, I think, at our last meeting to June.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So in terms of action, we'll be adopting budget through
what
June.
you heard today.
Right.
Yes, we'll be adopting the resolution. Second
When
page.
we have a resolution in here, we would include In my copy, we have also included the Religious Coalition.
Yeah, we did.
Yes, we have that corrected copy also in terms of, although we don't do any budgeting in terms of money.
What we're asking is a motion to adopt attachment number 1, that
With that change, yes, I would so move.
Second. Moved and seconded to adopt the resolution approving grantee 1992-93 budget and programming plans, resolution number 92-. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Collin?
Yes.
Roby?
Yes.
Strang?
Aye.
Grow?
Aye.
Costanis?
Aye.
Natoli? Fletcher?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. One final comment. You know, today we might give the impression that this is all dollars and cents and we're wound up in it. We're even confused at certain points as related to grantee funds, but never doubt for one moment but that this commission has through the years spoken not only in favor of the grantees and the programs that exist in this county, but we're also very proud of it. It's one of our products as well as one of your products, and we take great pride in it. We take pride in the fact that we're recognized nationally for what this county's people are doing insofar as community programming, community access. And when you walk out of here today, remember that rather than we're having some difficulties defining just how funds are going to be distributed. Now, we just took an act which says that this year's funds have been adopted officially, and we're talking now about July 1st, 1993, and from that date forward when we next meet. So thank you, volunteers, employees, board members, all of those who have had a part in the pride that we share with you as a cable commission. And we're ready for item number 4, Hometown Video Awards. I think this is a good lead-in from what I just commented, and that is the Hometown USA Video Festival is the largest and most diverse cable programming competition in the United States, receiving over 2,000 entries. 3 awards were received locally in the 1992 competition. SECC was awarded the Overall Excellence in Education Access honor for the second time in a row, second year, and 2 volunteer access community programmers received winning status. I'm going to make the comments and then we'll make the presentation in just a moment. Julie Braley was honored in the documentary profile category, and Leslie Fink was honored in the ethnic cultural expression category. And by transmission of these resolutions, SECC, Julie Braley, and Leslie Fink are to be congratulated. And I'm going to ask our vice chairperson, Isla Collin, if you, as I read these, we will ask you to step down there and make the presentation in our behalf. Would you be willing to do that?
All right.
First of all,
Orville, you didn't frame them.
They must be framed.
we don't frame people, we don't frame documents. First of all, to SECC, Mike, would you like to, David, would you like to come forward and receive this resolution honoring the accomplishment which you have received? Isla, take over.
Okay, I don't think I'm going to have to go through all the whereases, but I know that it does give all of us a great deal of pleasure to present this to you in terms of the overall excellence in educational access honor, and it brings a lot of honor to our community, so we really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry we didn't get it framed.
We're going to bill Orville
I'll find
for
a
this.
frame. You're going to bill Orville for the frame? Okay, personally.
Julie Braley.
Is Julie with us today?
No, she's not here. Julie was here but had to leave.
Well, you sure didn't look like Julie. But,
No, I didn't.
Okay. But then this is produced, she produced Sweet Harmony, the designated winner in the documentary profile category, so be sure and give her our congratulations. Again, this brings a great deal of honor on the whole community to have these awards, so thank you very much, Ron. Great.
Leslie Fink is not here, and so you're now Leslie Fink.
Leslie Fink, let's see, oh. I see he also gets 2 extra copies. Get this. Okay, and on behalf of Leslie Fink, we'll make the same presentation and the extra copies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make one comment.
Surely.
Included also in your packet is a copy of a letter that unfortunately came in a bit late to be included in the last time the Commission met. We appreciate that, in fact, the Chair, Orville Fletcher, began one of our roundtable sessions by reading it in full. I think it has a lot of things to say that we've been reiterating all afternoon about the special nature of Sacramento and the wards that these represent. And just a conclusion, one of the real positive attributes of Mr. Fink's winning this award is he is now a member of the Access Sacramento Board, and so it really does come around in a sense of appreciation and giving back. So we really thank you and your support, Sacramento Cable, and for the NFLCP's recognition. Thank you.
Thank you. We need a motion to adopt the resolution of recognition.
Well, naturally, I thought we would get around to that. Now that they have them, I would move adoption.
Okay. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Collin.
Yes.
Roby.
Aye.
Strang.
Aye.
Grow.
Aye.
Castanis.
Aye.
Natoli.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Motion
Thank you very
carries.
much. Item number 5, public opportunity to discuss matters not on this agenda but within Commission jurisdiction. I wish to say one thing before calling any of you forward, and that is to please understand that the Cable Commission has no authority to suggest to Sacramento Cable what any of the content of its programs might be. We have no authority or influence, nor do we ever speak on that topic with Sacramento Cable. I'm now going to call on Fred Ulmer. Each one of you will have 3 minutes maximum speaking time for the topic of your interest. Please come forward, Fred.
Thank you very much. I should start off by telling you we're not going to ask you to comment or do anything for us. Okay? I'm Fred Ulmer. I'm a resident of Sacramento, and I'm the new chairman of a new organization called Coalition for Quality of Multicultural Cable TV. I would like to make you aware of our existence, who we are, why the coalition was formed, and the objectives that we seek to achieve. The coalition is made up of local ethnic organizations that for several years received quality cable programming through Sacramento Cable Channel 2, which was the KTSF Channel 26 broadcast. Changes to the Channel 2 programs on August the 10th, 92, resulted in reduction or elimination of programs for some ethnic groups and substitution of lower quality programs for others. Dissatisfaction with the changes and lack of interest by Sacramento Cable caused the ethnic organizations to form a coalition on 19 August 92. The coalition believes that 2 multicultural cable channels are required to meet the needs of the Sacramento multi-ethnic groups. The objectives of the coalition are as follows. Establish open communication between Sacramento Cable and the coalition of organized Sacramento ethnic groups. Reinstate the quality cultural programs that were dropped from Cable Channel 2 on August 10th, 92 by establishing 2 multicultural channels, one with the KTSF program and the other with the International Channel. We want to monitor multicultural programs on the 2 Sacramento cable channels to ensure the availability of adequate, equitable, quality programs and to prevent inadvertent discrimination by omission in future program changes. We want to promote the educational and cultural value of quality multicultural cable TV on the 2 channels. And we want to do this to the ethnic members of the Sacramento community and the community at large.
1/2 minute left.
I'm going as fast as I can, sir. Now I would like to point out that the coalition could provide constructive evaluations from the results of monitoring the various language programs of the coalition of ethnic groups as a free service to cable. That should be a good marketing tool for them. Further, by promoting the language programs within the ethnic groups that belong to the coalition, that should have a positive effect on increasing their business. The coalition is of the opinion that the high-quality programs could result in Sacramento cable to be an economic success as well as a respected member of the community, which will benefit everybody. As of the 2nd of September, we have the Chinese, Filipino, Italian, Japanese, and Pacific Islander ethnic groups in the Sacramento County. This totals over 103,000 people.
Your time is up, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Bill Cerruti, who is director of the Italian Cultural Society. Bill, you have 3 minutes.
I don't want the false impression left here that somehow there is a satisfactory settlement of the changes on cable television. The reason this coalition exists is to show that there is still a continuing dispute with Sacramento Cable over the changes they've made. And I also think that some of the comments made here tonight about other options being available were a bit misleading. For one thing, the Italian language programming was cut from 12 to 3 hours. It's a very drastic cut for a large language community. I think it's important for you to know that the language community of the Italian community is over 40,000 people in Sacramento, and that this actually is larger than the combined Chinese and Japanese communities together. Also, for your information, Italian is the third most spoken language in the United States still today, and it's also the third most spoken language in Canada. For these reasons, we are still interested in getting our programming back on Sacramento Cable, 2 channels or not. So we're going to keep the pressure on. We thought you should know, since you wanted to be aware of disputes in the cable community, there is still a dispute. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next is Jan Alianik, who states that she's a spokesperson for the Pacific Islander community.
She wasn't able to stay this late.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have an appointment I've got to make, so I'd like to be excused and
certainly
ask my indulgence of the people in the audience.
Thank you. Watch us on,
Metro Cable, Channel 14.
Norm DeYoung or Jim Booty, President of the Filipino-American Chamber of Commerce. Which shall it be? Please come forward.
They were
here, but the other 2 are here.
Okay.
no, he means the next 2 in line.
Oh.
They were not able to stay either.
Joseph Wu, are you here? Thank you. Please come forward.
My of Sac State in multicultural program and business ethics. And I already spoke for several times regarding the issue. I'm going to give some specifics. I compare very carefully the international channel with KTSF. I'm going to compare on these 3 points. Number 1, the international channel doesn't have any editing. Many programs remain unfinished. And even when the person said, okay, I will come back in a moment, but it never came back. No heading to indicate as what the program, what is going on. And also the ads suddenly appeared very intrusive, while KTSF use our own language, translated into our own language, or use Chinese characters to indicate what it is. So many of the viewers feel very uncomfortable, even getting nervous when viewing international channel. Many of the international channel programs are either ecliptic, fragmentary, destroying, and even incoherent. Second point, many of the programs are outdated, like the one on August the 28th this year, still talk about the Persian Gulf, and the Persian Gulf was still going on there. And they were talking about one thing, Chinese New Year is identical with the Valentine's Day. I don't know what year it is. And the best program provided by international channels seems to be the cooking program. However, I watched one of them. They told us to defrost the frozen food by putting in a wok and some water there to steam it. They even didn't know the existence of microwave.
1 minute.
Okay. All right. The third point, those kind of pay time, we call pay means nonsense, okay? The pay time, the interviews are cheaply done. And for one time, for example, they got several Chinese musicians up there, and the quality is totally bad. And then I already said, I'm a professor of sextet. I could have the sextet students to perform much better. And then later, when they explain where they are from, they are students from mainland China. Probably they don't give them a dime. Now, Sacramento TV has taken away the French Fact restaurant and replaced with it is the Price Club frozen egg roll to fool the customers. I don't request you people to order them to change the program. They reduce the program. They should reduce the fee. That's what I request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jiang Wan, Vice President, oversees Chinese Business and Professional League.
My name is Chen Wen. I'm a professor at Sacramento State University. Serve several Sacramento Chinese community organizations. In the past few weeks, there have been articles and news releases portraying the current arrangement on Channel 2 as satisfactory to all parties. I suggest that the current situation still has many problems and questions to be resolved. I'd like to address one specific issue which is still very important to the Sacramento Chinese community, that is the quality of the Chinese programs provided by the international channel. With assistance from Councilman Tom Chin, several representatives of the Asian communities met with Mr. Kim Rooker and Mr. George Leitner, who is the Senior Vice President of International Channel, on July 16 and July 24 at the Sacramento Cable office to discuss some of the major concerns from the Asian communities. During those two meetings, Mr. Leitner agreed to establish a program advisory panel in Sacramento that will provide direct inputs and comments regarding the quality of the program. I personally received a letter from Mr. Leitner on July 30 in which he promised to send me a draft for the organization of the panel the following Monday. I regret to inform you that at this moment I have not heard from Mr. Leitner again on this issue. No other Asian representatives who were at those two meetings have received any information either. I just heard earlier this afternoon from Ms. Cindy Simonson that we could call the international channel regarding the advisory panel. And this is the first time I've heard of this particular suggestion. And it is an extremely unfortunate development because I understand that Sacramento Cable has made a long-term commitment to the international channel. We sincerely hope that Mr. Rooker will personally ask Mr. Leitner to fulfill his promise to establish a formal program advisory panel as soon as possible. If Mr. Leitner refuses to honor his promise, we hope Mr. Rooker will establish an advisory panel for the Sacramento Cable itself.
1 minute.
Thank you. I'm personally concerned with the quality programming because I've been teaching and doing consulting in quality management in the last few years. In many situations, statistics such as number of complaints are not true measures of customer satisfaction. This is especially true for the Channel 2 viewers, since many of them have limited English-speaking capabilities. I hope that Sacramento Cable will be as interested in the quality of its programs as the number of hours on the air in the future. I thank the Commission for allowing me to speak at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Noguchi, President of the Florin JACL.
Good afternoon. My name is Andy Noguchi. I'm the president of the Florin Japanese American Citizens League, and I thank you for this opportunity to briefly address the commission here. I think everyone's aware of the situation of trying to improve the multilingual quality television programs over cable. And first of all, I'd like to thank a number of people, members of the community who are attending here, who have been very active in expressing their concerns. We all hear so much about apathy and lack of involvement. That definitely hasn't been the situation here, and I think you've all had the experiences and seen people's involvement here. Secondly, I'd like to commend a lot of the political leaders in the Sacramento area. Many as individuals, not as a commission as a whole, have been expressing their concern to Sacramento Cable TV, have been involved in helping negotiations along to try to get some improvements in the type of coverage that comes over. So instead of taking a stand back approach to things, many of the political leaders have been taking a very important role in this whole process, and we thank people publicly for that. In the process of working with the different ethnic groups inside of the Sacramento area, we've had the pleasure of working with the Chinese community, the Italian community, Filipino communities, Jewish communities, many others. In the process of reaching some sort of a compromise, so to speak, on this cable TV issue, we have learned about many of the concerns of the Italian community, the Filipino American communities, the Chinese communities. We think there's still a great room for improvement as far as multilingual programming. And our basic question goes back to the whole thing of there's a great need out there. Why should multilingual programming be restricted to one particular channel? We think there should be two channels to satisfy that need. We call in Sacramento Cable TV to evaluate that and reconsider that in the future. In the meanwhile, we offer ourselves and our assistance in working with all the different parties involved, and we will offer suggestions on improving the multilingual coverage. Specifically, I guess for Ms. Simonson as acting general manager, there's been some concerns about the scrolling on Channel 4 not being up to date.
1/2 minute.
So we wish that could be improved because currently the scrolling previews do not reflect the accurate schedule of programs, especially Monday through Friday, 9 to 12, and Saturday and Sunday, 7 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So I think that would be one small step that Sacramento Cable can easily make. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We do thank you for sharing your views with us. This is one window into this kind of area of messaging, whatever you wish to call it, and while we may not comment, we are good listeners. Yes?
I'd also like to add, Andy, that one of the things that, as long as we're adding some ideas, one of the things I think for those of us who are monolingual, that only, speak English, that the possibility of subtitles or even more programs of international programming that were in the English language but would give us a taste of what's happening all over the world is very exciting. We are so limited in this country in what we see, and it's always exciting to see what's going on in other countries from their perspective, and the most we get is usually through BBC or through programs from British Broadcasting or Canadian, because at least the language is easy. The language is a big barrier when you're trying to understand international events if you never see it from any perspective but the perspective of this country. And,
that's why
we probably have to come back down so the microphone can pick you up. But I just like to...
I guess that was one of the reasons that people happen to like the subtitling on some of the Japanese programs too, for people who aren't that fluent in Japanese, and people having an opportunity to share the culture. So I think that would be another way to improve the programming. I was pleased to hear the comments from Access Sacramento that they're looking into securing the equipment to do so. That'd be a great addition.
I think maybe that's what Ron was going to address.
As chairperson, I'm going to say now that we have concluded the formal portion of our schedule. I'm not going to dismiss the group, but I wish to say, knowing that some of the commission members have other pressing obligations, I would simply ask commission members, is there anyone who wishes to raise any topic at this time?
I think Mr. Cooper wanted to speak on an item not on the agenda.
Yeah. Well, I wish to say, because of a message that I have received, that the formal meeting is now over, and those who wish to stay, please stay. And Ron, what is it you wish to say?
While we had so many representatives of different cultural and ethnic groups here in the room, I just wanted to point out that Karen Moody, our community relations person, is here. We'd like a sign-up sheet for all of those folks who have expressed interest in wanting to evaluate programming coming into our community. We'd like to invite, very specifically, the creation of that programming in the community, and we need those names and addresses so we can call a meeting and begin that process, and look forward to it.
Will you be at the back entrance there?
Right back in the back.
Okay, I find that I am one of those who must depart, so the official meeting is over. I would say if you have anything to say it informally to those persons here, but the meeting is adjourned.
And I appreciate Supervisor Collins' comment on international program, but I would like to say there's an American viewpoint, because